Hello and welcome to another video on my channel. If you're new here, my name is Courtney and I love reading books, talking about books, collecting books, all things books. So grab a coffee or a drink, a blanket, get comfortable because we are going to go through some of my favorite romantasy books. So I'm going to be recommending my top romantasy books from the last probably, I would say 2 years. I have about 7 books here to discuss. I wanted to try to keep it kind of not too overwhelming, so we're gonna just stick to these 7 for now, although there are also a lot of other romantasy books that I have read and loved. We're gonna go over my favorites. I also made myself note cards so I wouldn't forget, because some of these books I read quite a while ago. So the very first book we have on my romantasy recommendations list is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I read this last year, so I read this in 2024. Absolutely loved it. It blew me away. I was super intimidated going into this because of how big it is, and also because there was a glossary, and I was like, any book that needs a glossary is gonna be serious business. So yeah, I was a bit intimidated at first, but I shouldn't have been, because right away I was hooked by like the atmosphere of this and the main character Rave. This book, if you're not familiar, follows Rave as she's kind of like living in this, I don't know if it's like the slums or what, but she kind of like lives with her friend. Again, I read this so long ago that I literally had to make notes. So I rated this 4.5 stars when I read it. This is a super slow burn romance, which slow burn is my absolute favorite kind. So if you're a fan of slow burn, check this one out. I would say there's also like very minimal spice because of it being such a slow burn. So I wouldn't say that this is like a highly spicy romantasy, which I honestly appreciated. There was a lot of plot in this, a lot of twists and turns, and you also get these like diary entries on the side too, and you're not really sure where they're coming from. And those lent a really cool like extra perspective to the book. You find out some like wild things in this at the end, which always love that. So I would say it does end on like a bit of a cliffhanger, and the second book is supposed to be coming out sometime, I think the end of this year, hopefully. Cannot wait for it, because this, guys, this is so freaking good. It has dragons, elemental magic, slow burn romance, like I said. There's very immersive imagery in here, and one of my favorite things ever is obviously the dragons, but specifically moon plumes. For one, I love that name, moon plumes. I think that's what is being depicted on the front cover here. This, by the way, beautiful cover, stunning. But yeah, there is a glossary, and while that intimidated me at first, I actually ended up really loving that it had a glossary and utilizing the absolute shit out of it, because there is a lot to keep track of in this book. I honestly, before the next book comes out, need to reread this to kind of refresh myself on some of the finer points. Overall, loved this. Loved the main character. She's very like feisty and kind of wild, kind of just does whatever she wants. But at the same time, there are things, like, she's flawed. There are things that will frustrate you about her. So I would say this is a good one for fans of Throne of Glass, based on like the epic slow burn love story, as well as Heavenly Bodies. This one kind of reminds me of the vibes of that one. So if you like Heavenly Bodies, you should definitely check this one out. And then this next one is going to come as a shock to absolutely nobody. This is one that I read back at like, I don't even know, end of 2022, beginning of 2023. So it's been a while, but it lives rent-free in my brain always. This is one of my top romantasy series that got me back into fantasy, and that is the one and only Court of Thorns and Roses. This entire series is a 5-star series for me. I think at the time I rated this one a high 4 stars. I could be wrong, but every book after that was like 5 stars. So this is a 5-star series. Again, if you don't know, I feel like everybody at this point knows. If you don't know, this follows Feyre. She lives in the human lands and is a human, and she goes out one day and she kills a wolf in the woods, and that wolf turns out to be someone she wasn't supposed to kill. And so this beast basically comes, takes her away, takes her to the Fey lands. This is loosely based on like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which I would say this first book, you can see that. You can see the where she's pulling from Beauty and the Beast. However, after this book, that kind of all goes away. You follow Feyre as she starts to learn things about the Fey lands, and she is in the Spring Court with the High Lord. His name is Tamlin. You might have heard of him. And yeah, this is a really good time. There are trials in this. Fey, as I've said, magic, dark creatures in the woods kind of vibes. This is like everything to me. If you have not read this and for some reason you're like hesitant, don't be. Highly recommend if you like romance. Also, you don't get a lot of like spice in this one. The rest of the series is considered spicy, but this one, not too bad. And yeah, I did a reread and annotated the absolute crap out of all of these books, and they held up on the reread as well. So you always know it's a good book if it holds up on a reread. Highly recommend. This is like the book that started it all for me, and for a lot of other people for good reason. SJM is an absolute genius when it comes to writing an epic series that she leaves like little Easter eggs everywhere, and you don't pick up on that until you like look back. So great time. Absolutely wonderful time. Next we have a book that I actually read recently, and that is Blood and Steel by Helen Schurer. This is book 1 in the Legends of Thesmar series, and this one really reminded me of like if Game of Thrones and Witcher had a baby, because it kind of had, I don't know, kind of gritty vibe, I would say, of like Game of Thrones, while also having the dark creatures and creature hunters basically of Witcher. So this I rated 5 stars. I've only read so far books 1 and 2, and I think there's 4 books out currently with another one coming out possibly this year. Don't quote me on that, I could be wrong. So I've only read the first 2 books so far, but this one was absolutely amazing. I can't wait to read the rest of the series. Hold on, let me get comfy. I cannot wait to read the rest of the series to see what happens. This follows Althea, Zoltaire, and Wilder. Althea is not, like women in general, are not supposed to train, they're not supposed to wield weapons, but she has been kind of training herself and watching the shield bearers her whole life, because that's all she wants. She wants to be a warrior, she wants to leave her mark on the world. She's kind of living under the weight of this prophecy that was told to her a really long time ago, basically saying like, you're gonna die at this age, which in this book is like only, I don't even know, I think it's like 3 years away or something from when she's present in this. So yeah, that kind of lights a fire under her and makes her want to prove herself. And then along comes Wilder Hawthorne, who is a well-known legend. He is a warrior through and through. He's a legend, everybody knows his name. Cross paths, and it's a bit of like an enemies, I don't know if it's enemies to lovers per se, but like definitely dislike to lovers. They definitely don't like each other at first. I would say this is a slow burn, not as much of a slow burn as When the Moon Hatched, obviously because it's like a little bit shorter, but I would still consider this a slow burn. You've got great tension between the characters. This is very spicy. I would consider this like a very spicy series. Lots of scenes once you do get there. There are training montages in here, horseback journeys, so if you're a fan of those like I am, this is your book. Horseback journeys galore. Also, the side characters and the friends that Thea makes in this book are so cute. I really love her friend group. I love her sister. I love the little sprinkles of like what's going to come. Like you see little sprinkles of the romance that's going to be in the next books. I think she has another series, like a spin-off series with those other characters called Iron and Embers. So when I'm done with this series, I definitely want to pick that up, because the characters that follows, you see a lot in here, and I'm intrigued. I'm already intrigued, and I want to pick it up. There's a lot of magic in here, dark creatures of the woods kind of vibes. I recommend it. I recommend it a lot. It's very easy to read. I would say if you don't usually read fantasy, but you want to get into it, this would be a good one to start with, because like I said, it's pretty easy, I would say, to get into and to read and to understand. Like there's not like a ton of info dumping or world building. You're kind of just like dumped right in to what's going on. So that is this one. Love, highly recommend. The next book I'm going to recommend is one that I also read quite a while ago, back in 2023, and that is The Ever King. Again, you might have heard of this one. This is by L.J. Andrews and is part of the Ever Seas series. I believe the series is finished. Again, don't quote me on that, I don't know, but I have read all 3 books that are out. You have The Ever King, The Ever Queen, and The Mist Thief. I rated this one 4 stars, and then they progressively got better. So this one was 4. The second book, I think I rated like 4.5. And the third one I rated 5 stars, which The Mist Thief is definitely my favorite. The characters that one follows they're my favorite. But I do think that this is a really unique one in that it is like pirates and sirens in Fae. And so if you are a fan of pirates and, you know, the setting of being on a ship and kind of like on the seas, this one is definitely for you. I found that really unique. I don't think I've really read much other fantasy of like pirates or being on a ship. That's like the biggest thing that stands out about this to me. You also have a main male character who is very morally gray. He's tattooed, he is scarred, he wears earrings because he's a pirate, duh. And his name is Eric Bloodsinger. We love him. He has like magic. The magic in these books is really interesting. Like their names have to do with their magic. So he's Bloodsinger, so he can like do things with like your blood. Again, it's been a really long time since I read these, so I'm not remembering everything. But yeah, you follow him and you also follow our main female character, Livia. And these two are definite enemies to lovers. She is the daughter of like his sworn enemy because he as a child was captured by her people. These two factions of people don't get along. They don't get along so much that they have a barrier, a magic barrier in the ocean that keeps them apart, and like they can't easily pass through. Like Livia's people cannot easily pass through and go to his lands. It's a really great time. These books also really build on each other, which makes sense being that it's a series. So you know, for me at least, you get into this one and you like it, and then the next one you like even more, and then by the end you're like in love with these characters. Amazing, highly recommend. I would say this is very much giving me the vibes of like Bridge Kingdom. So if you're a fan of Bridge Kingdom, definitely check this one out. This one was a really, really fun time. I don't know what I did to my eyelashes this morning. I think I like crimped them the wrong way, but they're like curling like back into my eye and poking me. So if you see me messing with my eyes, that's why. The next book we have is one that I have been singing the praises of for a very, very long time. This is one of my favorite authors, romantasy authors as well, and that is The Serpent of Wings and Night by Carissa Broadbent. When I read this book, I just had the absolute best time. Like, this was obviously a 5 stars for me, and this is book 1 in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. It's technically a duology, but there is a novella in the middle as well. And I loved all 3 books. I would say I liked this one a little bit more than the second book, but they're all a really good time. These follow Oraya, I think it's Oraya and Rain. Oraya is a human, and she has kind of been living she's been taken in by a vampire, and like she has to pretend, I think, that she has magic so that she doesn't get killed, because like if you don't have, am I thinking of this right? I might be confusing this with another book right now. So I'm gonna like backtrack that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Anyway, this follows her, and she ends up having to fight in these deadly trials called the Kajari. If you win the Kajari, you get like this big prize, right? So everybody wants to be in it. She gets unexpectedly chosen to fight in the Kajari, which she's a human, right? With like no powers. So that's going to be very obviously dangerous for her. While she's in these trials, she meets Rain, who is a vampire, and she kind of has to pair up with him. They're an unlikely pair, but they have to pair up, and obviously eventually romance ensues. I would also say this is a slow burn, which again, my favorite. This is enemies to lovers, human vampire romance. I haven't really actually read a lot of vampire romance, which is surprising to me because I love vampires in fantasy books. So this is the one in my mind that sticks out to me the most when it comes to vampire fantasy romance. And this one does end off on a cliffhanger, which obviously makes you want to go into the next book. Oh, you know what? I think I was confusing a little bit of this possibly with Powerless, which makes sense because I was going to say if you are a fan of Powerless by Lauren Roberts or From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, then I think you should definitely pick this up. Obviously, it's not the same in any way to either of those that I just mentioned. There's just something about like the vibes of those. Like in Powerless, you also have trials, and then with From Blood and Ash, there are vampires. So that's kind of like the connection there. This was 5 stars, read it in 2023, obsessed. I love Carissa Broadbent's writing, and honestly, I need to reread these at some point because these, when I read them, had a chokehold on me. We have 2 more, guys, 2 more. The next book I have here, I feel like so many people have talked about, so this is probably also not news to you guys, but the next recommendation I have is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This is another more recent read. I read this in 2024, so like less than a year ago, and I rated it 4.5 stars. It was really, really close to being a 5 stars for me. This follows Saris Fane and Kingfisher. Saris, again, is like she's a human. She's living in the human lands. And she has a very hard life. She's like trying to take care of her and her brother. They have to be very careful and like hide because she's a thief, and she's stealing so that they can stay alive and get water. Getting water in the desert land that she lives in is close to impossible. They have water rations and it's like barely anything. Water is like viewed as like gold, right? So she's a thief, and she ends up stealing something that gets her into trouble, and lo and behold, she goes through a portal and ends up in the Feylands, which I'm not gonna spoil how we get there, but she ends up meeting Kingfisher, which is this man right here on the cover, and you might have heard his name, and a lot of girlies be loving Kingfisher, and I'm one of them because I'm just a girl. This is, like I said, portal fantasy. Like she goes through a portal, ends up in the Feylands. The magic in this is really unique. It's like alchemy, so it's based on metals, hence the name Quicksilver. That I found really fun. I love a unique magic system in a fantasy book. This is also enemies to lovers. I don't know. Yeah, I would say that this is enemies to lovers. I don't know if it's really that slow burn, but this spice had me sweating. Kingfisher here is a dirty-mouthed, tattooed fae who's very cocky, and so that lends itself to great banter and great spice. I honestly loved this book and their romance. This one also ends on a cliffhanger, of course, which book 2, Brimstone, I believe is also supposed to come out later this year. So thank goodness, because books that leave you on a cliffhanger and then are not resolved, we all know how hard that is. Never fear, if you read this soon, the second book is also coming out soon. And I would say read this if you're a fan of A Court of Thorns and Roses, which, yeah, I've heard a lot of people compare this to A Court of Thorns and Roses. I definitely don't think it's like exactly the same by any means. It's very different, but it kind of gives you the same, I would say, like feelings, kind of like giddy feelings. And obviously there's fae and magic, which you have in Ektar. I've also heard it compared to like From Blood and Ash, especially like Kingfisher and the main male character of that series. I've heard those two compared, so do with that what you will, but great time. Annotated. I didn't annotate a lot, but once I realized that this was going to be a really good book, I started annotating. Highly recommend. The last but not least book recommendation / series recommendation I have for you is the Plated Prisoner series. This is Guild, which is book 1 of this series, and I would not say that this one was my favorite. I still rated it 4 stars. It was a good time, but as the books go on, they just get better and better. This is a 5-star series for me. I read all of this pretty much except for the first book back to back in December, and for me, if I read a series back to back, like I can't put them down, that is a sign of it being like a top tier series for me. So this is one of them, 5 stars. This follows Auren, and it's a King Midas retelling. So Auren is gold touched. Her literal whole body, her skin, her hair, everything is gold. She is known as Midas, King Midas's favored. Well, King Midas he's an interesting character. He doesn't always treat her great. He literally has her in a cage, and it's like for her protection. And in the first book, she's very much just like kind of resigned to her life, and she does think that like he's protecting her. You're getting some Stockholm syndrome. Definitely check your triggers, by the way, for this first one. This first book is a completely different tone than the rest of the series. This one's very dark and kind of like depressing. But I think that the author did that on purpose, because as you go through these books, the character growth that Auren goes through is insane and amazing to watch. Like that is the biggest takeaway I think from this series, is Aaron's character growth and development. You also get more point of views as you go on in the books, and those side character point of views become like my favorite thing ever. I love the side characters in these books. Like side characters, the romance, oh my god, the romance. Again, this is definitely, I would say, a slow burn. Love interest. Aaron's love interest is just, he's amazing. Maybe he was the one I was thinking was compared to that from Blood and Ash. I also get those vibes as well. But anyway, this was such a fun time. It's fast-paced. Raven Kennedy's writing is very easy to get into. It's lyrical at times. It's beautiful. The side characters, like I mentioned, the character growth. Each book also, like I said, keeps you hooked for the next one. Like the way each one ends, you're just like, are you kidding me? And I think my favorites would be book 3, Gleam, because some crazy shit goes down in that one. And then also Goldfinch. Goldfinch, the wrap up to the series, was amazing. I cried. I feel like I can't really tell you too much because I don't want to like give things away or spoil it, but if you are a fan of the epic love story that is in Throne of Glass, if you're a fan of A Court of Thorns and Roses, if you are a fan of Game of Thrones, like the politicking and the kind of gritty world, if you're a fan of atmospheric, wintry settings, this series is for you. I do highly recommend reading this in the winter because, like I said, I feel like for most of the book, most of all of the series, if not all of it, like there's a little bit where you're not in the winter. Most of it is set in the winter and it's perfect to read in the winter. Highly recommend. 5-star series. There are 6 books in this series and it is completed, so great news. You made it through this video. Thank you so much. So sorry that I can't talk sometimes, but I would love to know, have you read any of these books? If you have, did you like them? Don't spoil anything in the comments, obviously, as usual, but I would love to know if you liked them as well. I would love to know also if you have any romantasy recommendations based on these books for me. If you could leave those in the comments. I'm always looking for more romantasy recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all those YouTubey things that you guys know how to do. I hope you're having a great day, whatever day you're watching this, and I hope to catch you in my next video. Bye!